So hello everyone, my name is Ken Morris and I am the Director for the EAP program at Local 591.
And I'm Tony Lepore. I am the co-director for the TW Local 591 EAP.
So just want to continue to bring attention to the fact that we have an active EAP program at Local 591. Tony and myself and the rest of our team, we all help with anything that has to do with substance abuse and things on the mental health spectrum such as depression and anxiety, anything along those lines.
And keep in mind, we don't only help the member, but we help the family member and the extended family.
And at the core of our program is confidentiality. We will not speak to anyone about something you speak to us about unless you give us permission. So know if you do talk to us, it stops there unless you let us talk to somebody else.
We've done videos in the past on depression and suicide in the workplace, which could be found on local591.com. So we asked Jaime to come back and talk a little bit more about that topic. Jaime, why are some of the people at a higher risk for suicide than others?
So there's a number of factors that go into that, and the largest risk factor for suicide is substance use disorder. And so if someone is actively drinking and using drugs, they're at a higher risk. The other things that come into play are family history. If someone has an immediate relative or a grandparent that has died by suicide, they're also at a higher risk. And the other thing is a relationship disruption. If someone has had a great deal of loss, if someone has recently been through a very painful divorce, they could be at risk as well. So there's a variety of factors that go into it.
So is suicide a selfish act?
You know, that's what I was always taught growing up, and as a clinician, this has been a area of focus of mine. And what we've come to realize with the research in the past 20 years is that people that die by suicide actually consider themselves a burden and feel like they're doing a favor to their loved ones by dying, by not being a burden anymore. And so when we talk to people that actually survive suicide attempts, they will tell you that they really thought that their loved ones and the world would be better off without them, which gives you a sneak peek into their mental state at that time.
Wow.
And what risk factors should we be aware of?
So we talked a bit about the risk factors in the beginning of this, and there are risk factors. Now, is substance use disorder, major relationship disruption, and that's an interesting one because 90% of people that die by suicide have had a major relationship disruption in the 6 months prior. And those relationships, that can be a marriage, a death. It can also be things like loss of a job, retirement. We saw so many things during COVID where people had significant losses that they would not have necessarily, or the universe might have necessarily considered them significant losses. So relationship disruption, and then also we've got the lethal self-injury. So that is a risk factor. So if someone has high-risk behaviors, if someone is impulsive, if someone has a very high pain tolerance because they've been, I don't know, doing a lot of dangerous kinds of jumping out of airplanes and, you name it. If they have high-risk behaviors, that can be a risk factor as well as cutting. And I know that cutting has become more common in terms of a coping mechanism where people will cut in order to release trauma, to release pain. And as humans, our basic instinct is to survive. And so if we get used to cutting ourselves, then we reduce that basic instinct to survive. So those are some risk factors.
So how would I know if someone was seriously considering suicide?
So that's the tricky one. So in addition to risk factors, we have warning signs. And warning signs can be so difficult to tease out, primarily because oftentimes people that are really on the verge of dying by suicide will cover it up. They will act as though everything's fine. It's called a false sense of recovery. And so this would be something to watch for. Let's say you know that someone has just gone through a horrible divorce. They just got out of treatment for alcohol addiction. They're going through some very serious things and they've been down. Then they come to work on Tuesday and they are, there's a spring in their step. They're all happy, but nothing's changed. Their world is still not a great place to be in. That would be a warning sign, the false sense of recovery. The other thing that is a warning sign, if someone starts talking about, it makes no sense to even be here. Some people will make offhanded comments like, I wish I wasn't here anymore. There's no point to all this. And also, if they start talking about being a burden. So back to that selfish act question. And this is true with our elderly. 1 in 4 suicide attempts for people that are 65 and older are completions. So think about that. And if someone wants to get off the planet 65 and older, they usually do it. They get up, and rather than someone under 65, it's 1 in 25. So if an elderly person, although 65 is sounding younger every day,
To me especially.
if they say, I'm a burden, my kids would be better off without me, that would be note to self. So any of that, and also giving their things away and making end of life choices when you know that they're not physically ill. So those are some warning signs that would tell me to spring into action.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any signs specific in the workplace to look for?
Yes, in the workplace, we know when someone is struggling in the workplace, there could be some irritability, conflict with their coworkers, isolating. That isolating is a huge one that I failed to mention in the warning signs, where someone is typically extremely social and then they're just keeping to themselves. So if you notice that someone isn't engaging with their coworkers, that perhaps they're missing work, that they're talking about a breakup, if they're talking about things that are going on in their personal life, and then if they stop coming to work, huge warning signs.
Wow. So that leads me into another question. Can the workplace intensify suicidal ideations?
Absolutely. And that's why as leaders, we're all responsible for how we treat people and for being trauma informed and to understand that everything that we do matters. And, back in the day when people would, not really care if they raised their voice, if they were degrading to their workers, those kinds of things, that's how we can increase the stress of someone. If we treat everyone with basic kindness and really respect their dignity as humans, then that will be a good way to prevent it. Because yes, we can increase the stress, especially now everyone's stretched so thin. The workplace can actually be what we call protective factors. And we talked about risk factors and warning signs. There are protective factors. Feeling like you belong. Feeling like we've got purpose and giving us something to look forward to. So the workplace, yes, we can increase it, but we can also help.
What if I notice that one of my coworkers is especially on edge?
I believe one of the greatest myths of suicide is that we have to tiptoe around it, that we can't ask. Simply saying, Tony, I've noticed that you're extremely edgy lately. I care about you. Is there something going on? And then if Tony tells me, yes, I've been very depressed lately, I've gone through a breakup, my kid moved across the country, that's when it's okay to say, Tony, are you thinking of ending your life? Every time we talk about it, we take the power out of it. So it's really okay to shine a light on it.
Wow. Well, that's good.
So do you have any recommendations for a safety plan if someone is seriously considering suicide?
Yes, never let them leave your sight.
Okay.
And so if someone is seriously considering suicide, and I had this happen with someone that reported to me, and they came in with a ligature mark around their neck. And we very directly asked them what was going on. They shared it, and I said, are you open to me staying with you until we get a plan together? And they said absolutely. And so I stayed with them until we were able to make arrangements for their family member and to get them safely into care. And so that safety plan involves having someone nearby that can be with them, and then having your EAP on speed dial, and whoever it is, be it Felicia or any other behavioral health representative, that they can get them into care very quickly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And what do I tell someone if they are worried about their loved ones?
So the most important thing that you can tell someone worried about their loved ones, first of all, go back to that whole selfish act thing. A lot of shame if we think that someone that we love is considering suicide. Like, there must be something wrong with our family. And I think the most important thing for them to understand is we get it, and we're here to support you. And first of all, a lot of folks don't understand that their loved ones can also go to treatment with their insurance. So we're here to help. We've got we've got the ways to help you, the means to help you, and you're not alone. And we get it, and we've got people that you can talk to.
So I guess moving on to a little bit different subject. So how do we treat someone that has lost a loved one to suicide?
Oh, that's such a good question. We have 49,000 deaths a year in this country by suicide, and 1.3 million attempts in 2021. And so again, we go back to the shame factor, and the way to treat someone who's lost a loved one to suicide is to talk about their loved one. And obviously we don't ask details, but we can just say, tell me about your son. And it's so important that people that die by suicide have a legacy. And so that's oftentimes what's difficult about grieving a loved one that's died by suicide, because it's almost as though they don't deserve a legacy. And so to ask them, how are you doing today? Tell me about your son. Tell me about some of the things that you enjoy doing. And to really allow her, and I say her because this reminds me of my dearest friend, but allow them to grieve properly and to give their loved one a legacy. And the most important thing too is that if you know someone has lost a loved one to suicide, 5 years later, still bring them up.
So avoidance wouldn't be the answer then,
No.
right? Okay.
I don't think avoidance is ever the answer.
Right.
Again, that doesn't mean we get to neck and ask all kinds of questions like, did you see it coming, how'd they do it? And people are ridiculous, and they do ask silly questions at times.
Right.
And so we preserve the dignity, but allow them to still provide a legacy to their loved one.
Okay, thanks.
What about depression? Do you have any recommendation for conversation starters if a coworker seems depressed?
Absolutely. And so depression, there's so many different kinds of depression. But if you notice that someone is isolating, if someone has no emotion, if you notice that someone isn't enjoying things that they would have enjoyed, like they used to love to talk about baseball and they don't do that anymore. The most important thing there is to sit down with them and talk about your experience of them and just say, hey, Tony, I've noticed that you don't smile anymore and the spring's out of your step. What's going on? Let's talk about it. And, to share your own experience. Hey, I've battled depression in my life, or my wife has, or whomever. Somehow to humanize the process and to identify with the person, and don't make it you, make it we and what you experience. And I don't know, as someone that has struggled with depression my entire life, I appreciate that. When people call it out and actually try to bring me out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always like when we can give our audience a couple takeaways to go home with.
Yes.
So this is a two-part question. When would it be time for someone that observes that kind of behavior that may be suicidal ideations? When is it time to work your EAP person? And when is it time to maybe go the next step further and get the emergency response team involved?
So we talked about warning signs. And if there are active warning signs going on where they're talking about being a burden, they're giving away their belongings, those kinds of things, then it's time to get your EAP involved. When do you call 911? You call 911 when someone says that they are suicidal with a plan. And also if they come to work and they tell you that they've made an attempt. Those are times to spring into action immediately.
So I think that's a gray area for most of us.
Yes.
Because you don't want to send someone running saying, I can't ever talk to Ken again, because the first thing he does is call 911, right? But if it warrants that, you want to make sure you're doing it. So to me, that's always a bit of a gray area.
And 911 is the extreme.
Right.
You know, I can tell you, I've never done that with an employee. I have, as I said, I'm going to sit with you and we're going to figure out a treatment option and we're going to get your family on the phone. But I didn't call 911. This is where it's super helpful to have people like Libby and Felicia, and you know you can call me anytime on speed dial to just quickly assess what's going on.
Right.
But by being present for that person and not frightening them and taking the shame out of the conversation, that's where you're going to get the best results. They're good ways, though, to bring in other sources of help, because we all get to do that.
Right, right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Jamie. I
Thank you,
definitely
Jim.
appreciate you being here, and thank you all for watching.